Thank you for joining us today as we open up the book of Psalms, trying to get some messages from these ancient melodies of wonder. Today we're going to be in Psalm chapter 91, an extremely familiar psalm that speaks so boldly of God's ability to provide refuge and care for those that are His. We're going to examine this psalm and be encouraged by God's ability to offer protection to anyone willing to follow Him. May this ancient melody massage your hurting soul. God bless.
Psalm 91 reads, He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For it is He who delivers you from the snare of the trapper and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a bulwark. You will not be afraid by the terror by night, or of the arrow that flies by day, of the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, or of the destruction that lies waste at noon. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not approach you. You will only look on it with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. For you have made the Lord my refuge, even the Most High your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your tent. For He will give us His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways, and they will bear you up in their hands, that you do not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the lion and cobra, the young lion and the serpent you will trample down. Because He has loved me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him securely on high, because he has known my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With a long life I will satisfy him and let him see my salvation.
As to why this is one that you have a grave preference for. First of all, God saves and gives us refuge. He will command angels to rescue us. God's safety, we should not be afraid. God is my protection when I must face danger. We can and must seek refuge in God, knowing that He will protect us from all evil, especially in this corrupt world. If you like saying amen, just go ahead. These are great things that you all have recognized from this particular psalm. It promises God's protection and deliverance from danger, keeps me faithful and in the Word, reminds me to surrender to the Lord, which brings me comfort and peace. In God we trust. First placed on the 1864 bronze 2-cent piece, President Eisenhower's administration permanently placed it on all U.S. coins on July 30th, 1957. In God we trust. Here's a good one. As in 9/11, in an emergency, God is my shelter and refuge. Psalm 91:1. Pretty easy to remember. This is a perfect prayer for God's protection. The devil tries to trap us and to tempt us, but God sends His angels to watch us. He hides us under His wings and provides a refuge and a fortress around us. Then He promises long life and deliverance and His presence to help us every day. All right. There's some of your thoughts. The only thing I want to mention by way of introduction is totally immaterial, but it was something I studied and I just want to mention it. There is a rabbinical tradition that if a psalm is not identified as to an author, or this is for the choir director, or one of those headings that typically most of the psalms have, if there isn't one of those, then the rabbis usually would attribute that psalm to the one before it, where there was mention. Don't know that it's tradition. Why they have that, I don't really know. But what that would mean is that Psalm 91 follows Psalm 90, and Psalms 90 was written by Moses. So if it is true, that would mean the message of Psalm 91 was for a people that had been set free from slavery, a people who had crossed the Red Sea, who were now into this element of needing to trust God. And that puts a little maybe different perspective on the whole of the psalm, if we accept that as having some validity. So we're going to look at the psalm in three different sections. The first section is going to be, we're going to look at the psalm as the residence of the protected. And verses 1 and 2 are going to give us that message. We're going to look at verses 3 through 13, and we're going to talk about the results of being the protected. So the residence, the results, and then lastly, we're going to look at the respite that is offered to the protected. And we're going to break it down that way. So we begin with this. The residence of the protected. Verses 1 and 2. The message is, in these two verses, comes from the author, whoever it is, himself. Personal pronouns are used. He talks about what he's going to do, or I. And so we understand that this psalm begins with the author identifying his own residence with God. And that's pretty significant, that he's going to share this with other people. This is where I'm at. Again, if it's Moses, the man who is the meekest man in the world, the man whom God selected to lead his people, who was resistant, then he's coming forth and he's saying, hey, this is the kind of trust I have in God. Okay. Here's how the psalm begins. He who abides in the shelter of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Abides has to do with sitting down. It's a place of settling, a place of remaining. So it's a place of comfort. It's home. The shelter of the Most High could be translated the secret place, and some translations I think actually do put secret in there, maybe secret place. It just means a covering. So I abide in God's place. I get to sit down with God, and God is covering me. He's covering me. And then I abide under the shadow of the Almighty. You know, the thing about shade is it sticks close to whatever the reflection is. And so here the psalmist is saying, I live in God's shadow. That's saying I live close to God. He and I are tight. I'm dwelling in his shelter. He covers me, and I'm living in his shadow. That's all designed to show how close that he is. Now, when I read this deal about the covering of God, it's amazing how that language is used, Old New Testament, about how God deals with our sins and how he views us. He covers us up. And I thought of, and I'm sorry if you're not a fan, but in the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter is given a cloak. And this particular cloak, he opens up as a gift, and it's a cloak that makes him invisible. And if you're familiar with the series, you know he uses it throughout the book series to get him places, and he gets there unseen, and he's able to know things and to understand things that he wouldn't have understood if he didn't have that cloak. You know what I have from God? I have a cloak that makes me invisible. It makes me invisible. I don't live in the burden of guilt. I'm invisible to my own guilt because Christ has set me free. So I don't go around living in my guilt because I have this cloak of invisibility. I don't let the words of others become harmful to me. Do you know why? Because God gives me a cloak. I'm invisible. They can't affect me. Okay, the psalm continues. My refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Refuge, shelter, the root is to flee there for protection. You remember the cities of refuge? Where so people could flee. And when the psalmist uses that term, that's the imagery that he's bringing forth. I have this place where I can run. This place where I can go for protection. This place of refuge. The fortress. He's a net to capture, defense, hold, to a strong place. God's going to provide a net for me. As I thought about this, as a kid, our family was big into circuses. Okay, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, built this new arena. Every year, the three-ring Barnum Bailey Circus came to town, and we usually went. And I remember those flying trapeze, you know, and they'd be up there, they'd be doing all this stuff, and then they'd start the drum roll. And the announcer would come out and he'd say, "Now, without the aid of a net." And you'd watch that net fall down and lay on the ground. Of course, what they didn't show you was that the guys that are in control of that, they're still at the place where they can raise it up real quick. But now without a net, watch this most daring feat, only done at Ringling Barnum Brothers Circus. And they'd perform this thing, and oh. But every time they got down off of the trapeze, do you remember how they did it? Boom, boing, boing. They'd jump down on that net. That's what our God is. He's our net. And so the psalmist says, he's my fortress. He's the place that captures me. I'm up here doing all this stuff, and sometimes I blunder, I fall, but God catches me. Isn't that a great picture? He's my net. So he says, I will trust in him. The idea is I'll have confidence. I'm going to be assured that God's going to be there for me. Okay, now we enter into the next section. That was all pretty much first person. That's what I'm going to do. Now he's going to talk about you, the reader. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Now here's what you guys need to understand. The results of being protected. He's able to deliver thee. Great song. What we're going to talk about. We're just going to do the first verse. And we'll do it slow. Okay, until we hit the chorus. 'Tis the grandest theme through the ages rung. 'Tis the grandest theme for a mortal tongue. 'Tis the grandest theme that the world e'er sung. Our God is able to deliver thee. Now we got to be ready. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. Psalm 91, our God is able to deliver. So let's look at some of what this means for us. For it is he who delivers you from the snare of the trapper and from the destructive pestilence. You know, before the days of shotguns, if you wanted to capture a bird, if you wanted to eat fowl, you had to catch it. You had to develop a snare, you know, one of those box traps that came down on top and you pulled you had to capture a bird. And so the psalmist says, he delivers me from the sneaky trap that's trying to capture, to entrap me. God delivers me from that kind of hiddenness. And he delivers me from pestilence. This was a really interesting word in the original language because it was used in the sense of destroying. And the root word means to arrange destructive speech. So God is able to deliver me from people that are trying to trap me, and he's able to deliver me from the destructive speech that others invent about me. Wow. God is able to bring that kind of deliverance. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will take refuge. Again, the imagery of the protection of a mother bird and the length that they will go to protect their young. For the last couple of years now, we've had a robin who builds a nest in our grapevine that's right outside our front door. So every time you go out the front door, you're getting squawked at because you're just about that far from this robin. Well, we love to watch and the little robin blue eggs and the hatch and the feeding of the young. But what's amazing is what that mother will do to protect her nest. And she will try to sound like she's a ferocious lion. But the thing about this imagery is that that mother will take on whatever is necessary to shelter the young. If it's weather, the mother will sit on top and take the weather so that the young ones don't have to. If it's a predator, the mom will step in and take care of the young ones, even at the expense of their own life. And so here's God being recognized as this protector of their young. And Jesus himself demonstrates that mentality. Remember when he's riding into Jerusalem? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have gathered you under my wings, how I would have protected you. So that's part of what God does for us. His truth is a large shield and a bulwark. Truth. This is a certainty. It is stable. Shield is the Hebrew word that means a large shield. In some translations, I guess this one actually says large shield. And the idea of this shield is that there is prickliness and cold involved in that shield. Again, I'm not understanding all of what that might mean. My mental picture is a cold shield is going to go a long way in extinguishing the darts of the flaming darts of the evil one. If that shield is cold. If it's prickly, not everybody's going to be willing to approach that shield and to take it on, because it's like handling a porcupine. So God protects me with that kind of shield. And this bulwark is that which surrounds and brings about security and safety and strength. So, God, the truth is, you're my shield. You're my surrounding strength. You will not be afraid of terror by night, or arrow that flies by day, of pestilence that moves in the dark, or of destruction that devastates at noon. You'll not be afraid. You will not be frightened. You'll not be in terror. The idea there is a sudden alarm that would awaken in the dark. You won't be that way, because God's the protector. Even in the daylight, the arrows that are assaulting you are not going to be of benefit. They're not going to work, because God is going to be there as your protection. The pestilence we've already looked at, that speech that's designed to destroy, it isn't going to work because God's going to be there. The destruction, being cut off, is not going to work, even if it's in the brightness of the noon sun, because of God. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not approach you. 1,000 of evils tumble at your side just when they get close. I don't think this gives anything away. My granddaughter has seen the movie Dune 2 5 times. I understand it has the attraction of Star Wars when it first came out to a younger generation. But Mandy and I went to this movie, and one of the unique things that happens in this futuristic Star Wars type movie is that the warriors have some little thing they carry on their belt that if they push this button, it's like, okay, I'll go back to Star Trek. For those of you that are lost, it's like a protection shield, and they push this little button, and they're surrounded by this blue shield, and they're out here ching ching ching, and the people are hitting this shield, and it's going boing boing. But the thing about it only lasts so long, so that's the negative of it. But they have this little protector. And it's right there. And that's the image I got when I read this about God. People want to assault God. All he's got to do is push his little button, ping, and now it's all gone. They can't even touch him. And so thousands tumble at your side. They just get close and they fall down. God, that's how great you are. Tens of thousands fall at your right hand. Remember what the right hand usually means in Scripture? The power. The power. God, your power is so great. 10,000 people are falling just because of your power. The approach, the idea of reversing actions or to make liable make a viable argument or cause someone to stand back, it shall not approach God. None of these things make him stand back. None of them put him on his heels. None of them catch him by surprise because he's God. So even though all that happens, it doesn't affect God. You will only look on with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. For you have made Yahweh my refuge, the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, and no plague will come near your tent. All God has to do is look. Don't you like that? All this stuff, this devastating things, all God has to do is look. And he's providing protection. He's giving us this covering, the strength, just by the look that he has. You are my refuge. You are my dwelling place. No evil will even come near him. No plague will come near your tent. Not even going to be able to dwell where you are because of God. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the fierce lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you will trample down. God has a whole heavenly realm of angels to command. And they're at his disposal. They're at his bidding. And he can use those. Those heavenly hands will be bearing people. Will lift us up. God stomps out a fierce lion-like activity. I don't think it's coincidence that Peter will reference the evil one as a roaring lion. And here the psalmist says God stamps out. He stamps out this vicious lion. And then you have this cobra, this venomous animal. God's the anti-venom. He takes away that toxic nature, that poison. Young lions and serpents God tramples. And it means to tread abusively. God tramples. Becky tells the story of, as a kindergartner, I think her dad was taking her up to Yellowstone Bible Camp. He was kind of keeping an eye on it because he was the closest preacher. And there was a rattlesnake in the road. And I think it was a Volkswagen or a Jeep. They were driving. And her dad ran over that rattlesnake. And of course, the little kid's thinking, that rattlesnake's going to come up through the floor, you know. And so she's all worried about this. But then he went, put it in reverse, put it in forward. That's how God treats these things. He's going to trample them. He's going to be abusive to them to protect his own. Okay, lastly, the respite of the protected. These are the words of God. We had the words of the author. We had him talking to the people, and these are what the people can count on. And now here's God going to get into the conversation. Because he has loved me, therefore I will protect him. I will set him securely on high because he has known my name. He has loved me, literally, because he has set his love upon me. Because someone has set his love upon me, I'm going to provide for them protection, for a safe place. You'll be known by name, full recognition of who those that love him are. Remember Bill leading us in discussion about that book of life where names are? God knows by name those that are his. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in his distress. I will rescue him and honor him. To call upon him, to address by name. God's name is what glorifies him. Distress means tightness. So every tight place we're ever in, God says, you can call upon me. You can call upon me. And he says, I will honor. I will weigh out with heaviness what's being asked of me. Deeply consider this. Process this. And I will honor him with long life. I will satisfy him and I will show him my salvation. Long life is an interesting in the Hebrew understanding. It has to do with a length of days. And in our Anglican way of thinking about that, we think it has to do with number of years. But it actually has more to do with the manner of days. In the Jewish mind, it had to do literally with what they called warm hours. The warm hours. This morning, walking the dog, and it was 32 degrees, and the wind was at least that strong. I longed for some warm hours. But we understand as spring comes, we understand what that warm hours is, don't we? The sunrise to the sunset, that period of the day when things just feel better. And God says, I'm going to honor the people who love me, who call upon my name. I'm going to honor them with warm hours. Warm hours. And I will show him my salvation, my deliverance, my aid, my victory, my prosperity. I'll show him what I've really done for him. Salvation. All right. So I want to end with this little thing. So what does all that mean? So what does it mean? I mean, we've just looked at the fact that God says, I'm a shelter, I'm a refuge, I'm a fortress, I'm a deliverer, I'm a net, I'm a protector, I'm a shield, I'm a rescuer. I'll give you my salvation, I'll give you the length of days. What does all that mean? Let me just remind you, in John chapter 9, the disciples are with Christ. They come upon a blind man, and the disciples have bought into the customary way of thinking. And so their question to Jesus is, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? The Jewish thought was, if you did wrong, there was some kind of a punishment. And so if you exhibited some kind of a malady, a physical handicap, then there must be some sinful reason that that's happened to you. Well, Jesus clarifies that for them. But the reason I want to just mention that is because sometimes Christians tend to go the other direction. We find it easy to adopt the prevalent thought that if I'm righteous with God, then nothing bad ought to be happening to me, which is just kind of the opposite way of thinking. And doesn't this psalm indicate that? If I'm right with God, he's promised to be my protector. He's promised this, he's promised that, Isn't this psalm saying to us, you get right with God and things are going to be right in your life? And you shouldn't expect mistreatment. You shouldn't expect hurt. You shouldn't expect suffering. You shouldn't expect pain. Well, I want to remind you something. And you will remember this. You probably caught it when it was being read. Do you remember Satan quoting this psalm when he was tempting Jesus? And he said, he's promised to keep you from stubbing your toe. Who had misunderstood this psalm? Satan. This is a common thing. Remember what he said to God about Job? The only reason he serves you is because he's rewarded for it. Satan misunderstood. He thought that if you serve God, people would think nothing bad ought to happen to them. He thought Jesus misunderstood it, or he was hoping he would. And he threw that out as a temptation. God's promised to lift you up, lest you trample your toe. He's promised you this. Jesus, what did he say? It is written. Oh, Satan, you're misunderstanding that psalm. You misunderstand the message there. So, if we go down a certain road, we're obviously going to be more pleasing to Satan than we are to God in how we understand this psalm. And the reason that is significant because he was hoping that Jesus had misunderstood this psalm. He wanted Christ to think that God was his spiritual sugar daddy and that he was going to be delivered with all kinds of good things, and there shouldn't be any woes in life. And this is after Jesus has fasted for 40 days and became hungry. Satan knew when to show up. Didn't God promise you that things would go right for you all the time? So just recognize this and this will happen. Okay. Satan loves it when modern believers misunderstand this message as well. So here it is. I could have just said this and left everything else out. Sorry, it's the preacher in me. The psalm is not saying God will protect his people from all of life's troubles. The psalm is not saying that. It's not saying when I am under distress, I need to cry out to God and he will take that trouble away from me. The psalm is saying that God promises to protect his people through all of life's troubles. Not from, but through. We don't get any special treatment by society, by the world, by evil, by God, just because we're his child. But we get divine help because we're his child. And I tell you what, that's better. That is better. Look at these passages. For man is born for trouble as sparks fly upward. Been around that campfire at night? Throw the new fuel into that fire, what happens? Sparks fly. And Job says here, man's born for trouble, just like sparks are going to come out of a fire. That's what we're born for. We're born for trouble. Genesis chapter 50. After a life of being a spoiled child, after a life of being hated by his brothers, after a life of being sold into slavery, after a life of being lied about, imprisoned, after that life, what did Joseph say? You meant it for harm, but God meant it for good. The events aren't what was protected from, what Joseph was protected from. The faith is what God kept watch over. And so Israel continues because of Joseph. They don't starve to death because of Joseph. They're brought into the best land because of Joseph, because God was the deliverer, the protector for Joseph. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, you all probably have it memorized. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Is that verse telling us we serve God and everything in our life is good? No. And then how about this last one? Jesus is preparing his disciples for his departure. And he says, but you will be betrayed even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name, yet not a hair of your head will perish. But by your perseverance, you will gain your lives. Okay, I have a question. It seems to me that death would be disturbing the hairs of your head. But Jesus told his disciples that even if their life was taken, the protection of God, God's hairstyle was not going to be given up. Not a hair is going to be harmed, even if they kill me, because I'm still under the protection, the rescue, the net of God Almighty. So, do not think that this psalm is a promise that your life will be kept from pain, suffering, turmoil, and troubles. Don't say Psalm 91 is such a peaceful place because God's just going to work out everything in my life just perfectly, because he won't. And I look around and I see people's faces who they're remembering some of their hurts, but they're also remembering God was there, that God did rescue through the death of a child. through 6 months in the hospital. God's still there. It is God's promise that if you hang with him, he's going to hang with you. And that's the beauty. He's promised to do that. So, that means deity dwarfs any destructive dilemma or dark difficulty of your day. Deity dwarfs anything. God's our trump card. And Psalm 91 says he's always going to be there. Even in the storm, he will be there.
Thank you for taking the time to study with us. Subscribe to our channel if you'd like to be notified when new material becomes available. Also, we love to study Scripture. If you have questions that you'd like to discuss, if you have doubts about your standing with God, we'd love to get together and open the book. You're always welcome to come and assemble with us. We worship at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings at the corner of 56th and Vine in Lincoln, Nebraska.